This is the solution to the comprehensive lease problem in Zoom, and I'm going to go through this in a pretty quick fashion just to go over the big points. So we have the lease facts, we have the fair value. So right away, you know the lease receivable is going to be $730,120. We have a 12/31 payment date, payments in advance, estimated residual value, and there's no transfer. So that there's no transfer is important because let me see if I can get a pen up here. Here we go. There's no transfer is important because when we calculate the lease payment, that means the lessor is getting the $20,000 back. So we have to include that calculation in the lease payment. All right, so the original value of the item is $730,120. So your numerator is just going to be the $730,120. Now, if the item had been transferred to the lessee at the end, that you'd be done. But the lessor is getting back the $20,000 at the end of the lease, and in present value, that's $14,700. So effectively, that's offsetting some of the costs for the lessee. So we have to subtract that out. This total amount here, the $730,120 minus $14,700, that is the amount to be recovered through lease payments. And of course, here's the present value ordinary annuity due. Annuity due for payments at 8%. So that's a payment, and as I was mentioning, if it's transferred, the other problem you could get is you would just take out the subtracting the $14,700. Okay, the present value calculation for the lease receivable. We know what the answer is going to be because if you have the fair value in a problem, the lease receivable, not the lease liability, but the lease receivable is always going to be the fair value. All right, but sometimes you don't get that. So you take the lease payments plus any amount the lessor expects to get back at the end, and we got to present value those. So what did we have? Essentially, we're doing the lessor's problem in reverse. I'm just going to put an X there for times. Was it 3.5771? Yes, it was. And 0.7350. So this slide is really here just to remind you that the fair value is the lease receivable, and also just show you it has to be that because when you solve for the payment, you're making that payment equal in amount such that the present value of the lease equals the fair value. Okay, so this slide is really just hammering home the point that the fair value is the lease receivable capitalized, and also showing you if you get a problem without the fair value, reminding you how to solve for the lease receivable. This is when the item is returned, and you can tell because the residual value is in there. If the residual value weren't in there, then it would have been a case where the item is transferred. Okay, so we want to now lease right of use asset capitalize. Okay, so the first thing is we're just going to have they transfer the item back, so the lessee doesn't have anything associated with a fair value payment. All right, so you just have the first component of the payments, and let's see, 2.5, 3.5771, and I'm getting 715,420, which is good because that's the solution. And explain why $0 is associated with the guaranteed residual value. So let's see, is there any guarantee? Yes. Oh, Okay. So the guaranteed residual value less than or equal to the expected residual value then lessee expects the realized, that is the ultimate residual value, to be cover the guarantee. So basically, at the end of the lease, if your estimate is perfect, which it probably isn't, so there'll be an adjustment, but here we are today, 4 years before the end of the lease, we expect the residual value to be $20,000. We guarantee $20,000, but we don't think we're going to have to pay on any of it because the lessor will get the item, sell it for $20,000, and then we won't have to cover anything. Okay? So whenever the guarantee is below the expected residual value, there's no payment. Let's say the guarantee had been $25,000, then you would have had to add the present value of the $5,000. All right, show calculation here. So the first year interest expense, we have to get the beginning of period carrying value, 715, 420, and there is a day one payment of 200,000. So it's 515, 420, and we multiply it by the effective interest rate, 8%. Okay, and that equals the 41,234. Now, this is not the right journal entry down here. We make some space because you have a lease liability and your cash payment isn't 41,234. It's actually 200,000. So 200,000 minus 41,234, and you get 158,766. Okay. So we got 158,766. Whenever there's a cash payment, you like here, the cash payment is at the same time as the interest expense. Part of it goes to the lease liability and part of it goes to interest expense. On most payment dates, well, you're only going to have 12/31 or 1/1. On 1/1, 100% of the cash will reduce the lease liability. Okay. All right. So 12/31 FY02 lease liability amortization. All right. So I'm not quite. Oh, I know. So this would be, these journal entries are for a 1/1 payment date, and the other one should have been a little different. But anyway, so let's put interest expense up here. And there was the other thing that was confusing to people, that there was originally 3 payments here. But what we're trying to get is the original, not the original, but the beginning of period carrying value. So this total amount in the brackets is the beginning of period carrying value. Let's go look at the schedule. So what it's asking for is this interest expense here. So you actually have the answer in the schedule. So the beginning of period carrying value is 356,654. But if you look at the schedule, before 12/31/03, we only have 2 payments of 200,000, and then we add back the interest. So let me go back to this slide. This should be 41,234, and most of you assumed I was correct, which is probably not the best assumption, but it was reasonable, but not the best. But what you need to know, some of you did say, hey, what's up with the three payments? So the idea of this problem wasn't to plug for this 41234. It was to know that you were supposed to subtract all payments and add back all interest accrued to get the beginning of period carrying value so that you could calculate the interest expense. Okay, so a lot of you did good algebra, but overlooked the lease accounting. All right, so which then you would have found this error. Regardless, it's good. Obviously, it's good to understand what's going on. The other slight error in this was the interest expense. So let me add it up here. Let me go to this slide here. So the total interest expense is the sum of the payments, including any payments on residual value, and you subtract out the amount capitalized. So it's like a car loan where you buy a car for $25,000 and then the loan tells you you're going to make $30,000 in payments. The $30,000 minus the $25,000 is the total amount that you're going to pay in interest. So 800,000 minus 715,420. 800,000 715,420 minus, and I got 84,580. 84,580. Total amortization expense is, there's no residual value, so it's the amount capitalized. And shocker of shockers, this is not a coincidence. It's the total sum of the payments. So if you ever ask for the total expense to lessee of the lease over its life, sum up the payments. Otherwise, you might be asked for these components, the total amortization and the total interest expense. Okay. So it's just 4 times the times of the payments. 4 times the 200,000, $800,000. Okay. So lease liability, let's see, where are we? Lease liability, total current long-term balance. So this slide is really showing you how to break through and get the separate current liability, but also probably the most difficult question, or one of the most difficult questions, is updating the carrying value. Okay, so obviously you have the amortization schedule here. I can't stop myself, must correct this thing. Okay, what did I get? 84,580. So 84,580, I'm putting the right amounts in here. So these aren't from the total. If they ever ask you for total interest expense, they're not asking you to do the schedule. That would be take a very long time and not really work out. Okay. So we have 715, 420, payments through 12/31 FY02. So 1, 2, there's two $200,000 payments. 400. Interest expense through 12/31 FY02, 41,234. 41,234. I want to put this in a parens. Indicate that. So it's 315, 420. Less 41,234. I got 274,186. Let's see. 315. Something's not working out. So it's 315,420, 41234 plus, oh, there it is. I must have done a fat fingers error. So 356,654. 356,654. Okay. The current portion is just the cash payment in the next 12 months, which is 200,000. So the long-term portion is 156,654. Okay. So this slide is just about reminding you how to update your carrying value. So I would call this getting the 356,654 one of the more difficult problems, because you have to remember the payments to subtract, and then you have to calculate the interest expense to add back, and you have to just get it all lined up right, which is easier for 1231 because this schedule is done on payment dates. On a 1/1, you can't just read the row. There's an adjustment to make, which if you look at the other problems with 1/1 dates, you'll see. Okay, but it is kind of challenging because you start here and then you subtract, and you get this and add your interest, calculate your interest and add it back. All right, so that's the Zoom assignment, and absolutely be sure to look at the problems with 1/1 dates. They are a little bit more complicated.